Welcome to the Christchurch Live Open Day session for the Sciences. I'm Jennifer Yee, the tutor for admissions, and I'll be reading out some of the questions that you've sent in. You can also add new questions live on the Open Day website, and you can vote up any questions already there that you think are important. So the Science Tutors will be talking to you live here from 11 to 12, and then 12 to 1, there'll be a live typed chat where we'll have a chance to answer any questions that we can't fit in now. I'll ask everyone to introduce themselves and say what subjects they can answer questions about. So would Tonya like to start by introducing herself?
Hi, I'm Tonya Lander, tutor for biology at Christchurch, and I have a bit of a cold, so if I'm really scratchy, then please excuse me.
And would Dom like to introduce himself?
Hi, I'm Dom Alonzi. I teach the biochemists at Christchurch and the first year medics there, metabolism and other parts of biochemistry.
And Jason?
I am Jason Davis. I'm a professor of chemistry, so I'm a tutor at Christchurch. I run a research team at the department. I'm very happy to answer any questions about chemistry, what we look for, the structure of the degree, the admissions process, and how we teach.
And Laurence?
Hi, I'm Laurence Brassard. I'm an engineering tutor at Christchurch, and I teach subjects related to mechanics and materials.
And Erwin?
Hi, I'm Erwin Zaid. I tutor in computer science at Christchurch. Happy to answer any questions relating to computer science at Christchurch or in the department.
Kevin?
Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm a maths tutor here at Christchurch. I teach mostly pure mathematics subjects in college, and I'm happy to answer questions about mathematics or the joint schools that you can do with mathematics, statistics, computer science, and philosophy.
And Stephanie?
Hello, I'm Stephanie Cragg. I'm a tutor for medicine. I'm also a biomedical scientist and a neuroscientist, and I teach our Christchurch medics in a range of topics, preclinical medicine and neuroscience, and I'm very happy to answer your questions about the Oxford Medicine course.
Great. So I might start off with one general question that's been sent in advance, which is what's different about studying the course in Oxford and in Christchurch in particular? Does anyone want to speak to that about their own subject area? What's different about the course in Oxford, and why is it better? Steph, yeah?
Yeah, I'm very happy to give a sense of the Oxford Medicine course. Clearly, there are a range of different medical courses across the country. Some are more divided into preclinical and clinical components, or have a sort of integrated teaching throughout the 6 years. We have a distinct preclinical course followed by a 3-year clinical course. So that's a strength that we have here, and we have a lot of specialist tutors in a very large range of topics who you can get direct teaching from. So I mean, that's one of the ways that Oxford is Oxford. Oxford also for medicine has a international reputation for its medical, clinical and preclinical teaching and research, and so for successive years has been ranked top in universities, both nationally and internationally. So we think it's a great place, both in terms of the academic and clinical teaching for medicine that make Oxford stand out in some ways.
Great, thanks. And we've got a question that's come in live, which I think applies to a few different subjects. How will interviews work with drawing diagrams or graphs, etc.? So it's true that in interviews where we've done them face to face, people have often, for quite a few subjects, have had to solve problems or draw a diagram using paper. And what's going to happen? So the question is, what's going to happen now with the remote format? Laurence, could you answer that one? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm going to answer for engineering. So I must just say first that we are not sure yet entirely of how this will work. We are still working on it, but I can already tell that every year we are interviewing students remotely who cannot come in person. So we have to do something about it anyway over Skype. So we can always do that, which means that, you know, the cheap option is you just work out on paper and you show us your answers on the screen, and this works. But we are thinking about ways to make it maybe better and more accessible for everyone, making sure it doesn't disadvantage anyone.
I think there's actually some work being done on another program that will allow people to see the screen so that you can, you know, draw on something and it will appear in live time for the tutors who are doing the interview. So there is work being done on that. It applies to, I think, engineering and physics and maths as well. Is that right, Kevin? Do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, yeah, it would apply to mathematics. But as Laurent says, we already have had to consider this with usually international students who can't come to Oxford. So it's not completely alien phenomenon. And one can also think about the kinds of questions that you ask to make, if you like, very, very precise diagrams unnecessary, so that we can mitigate somewhat by the nature of the questions that we ask, because as Laurent points out, it's difficult to be able to ensure that everyone has the same resources at their end.
Yeah, and we have a question on biology, which was sent in advance. So what is biology like at Christchurch, and how many people do we accept for biology?
Well, so it used to be that we took 5 students each year in biology, but we just recently changed last year to a 4-year course and began to take 4 students per year, but it actually ends up being an increase of students overall. And in the first year, the majority of tutorials are with me and the other biology tutor, Stephen Harris, although we also bring in other people to cover subjects that aren't our specialist subjects. And then in the second and third years, students tend to organize their tutorials more broadly with people who are offering lectures across the course. And then the fourth year is a research project. So during the second and third year, generally people find a subject area that they're interested in doing their project in, and they do that project in the fourth year.
And we've got a question about biochemistry interviews. What are they like? John.
I suppose they're like all the interviews for all the different subjects. They're not really a test of knowledge. They're a problem that you work through with the tutors and see how you think about it and how you adapt, and with a set of rules maybe established at the start, you know, in terms of, you know, things that you may have known at A-level in terms of chemistry. You might need that sort of knowledge, but it won't be anything that you need to learn in advance. And in biochemistry, you have at least two interviews at 2 different colleges, so that that's all pre-arranged beforehand. So if you apply to Christchurch or wherever, you'll have one at one college and at another college.
Great. And there's a general question that's come up, and I think it's something quite a few people are interested in knowing about, but it doesn't specify a subject. So I'm applying post A-levels. Will my application be treated differently? Don't know if anyone wants to answer that one. Yeah, Tonya?
No, is the short answer. It doesn't make any difference to us when we see that somebody either has their A-levels already or has predicted A-levels. It's just that if someone then is offered a place, they can feel more confident that they have their offer grades.
And then a question we were sent in earlier, what would a typical week studying chemistry be like in Oxford?
What a typical week would be, so all lectures are AM. So you typically have something like 10 hours of lectures per week, 2 afternoons of practicals per week, and tutorials classes you would have PM scattered through the week, including potentially Saturday. So when you're not in lectures or doing practicals, you'll be preparing for tutorials or classes. So we typically advise people to prepare for a 50 to 60 hour week. So it is very heavy. So lectures AM, practicals PM, classes, tutorials, PM. And it's a fairly equal split across 4 subjects in the first year. Those 3 of chemistry plus mathematics, and that becomes the 3 core chemistry subjects across years 2 and 3.
Thanks. And we've got a question that's come in about maths and computer science. So what is the course structure like? So we've got a mathematician and a computer scientist. Do you want to go first, Kevin? Or you can both unmute.
Sure. So the course in the first year does a lot of the mathematics course, but it tends to focus on the more theoretical ends of mathematics, so what people call pure mathematics, analysis, and linear algebra. And then so it's roughly half and half between mathematics and computer science. That's still essentially also the case in the second year. The mathematics is again focused on the more theoretical end, and then in the third and fourth, if you do it years, the opportunity to specialize is much greater, and so the exact balance between the subjects would depend really on how your interests had evolved over the initial 2 years. So that's maybe in broad terms. I don't know if Erwin maybe wants to jump in and balance the computer science side of things.
Yes. So for the computer science part, in the first year, you'll do basically a good mix between more abstract programming language courses and some more software engineering stuff, in addition to the math courses, of course. And then in the second year, you have various options to choose from, and you can choose I think one of the great strengths of the Oxford CS department is that there's quite a variety of courses. So if you want to do more theoretical type stuff, that's available. If you want to do more engineering type stuff, that's available. So that's how, in general, what the course structure on the CS side would look like.
Okay. We might go back to just one of the questions that was sent in advance about medicine. Sounds like a really interesting one from my point of view, so I'd like to hear the answer. So I've heard that there can be questions on ethics in a medicine interview. Could you give an example of that type of question? Stephanie.
Okay. Let me set that a little bit in context, because our interviews for medicine aim to assess several things, and two main things, which are your suitability for medicine as a career, for which we try to assess a range of your personal characteristics, and the other part being your academic potential. So we spend a lot of time trying to help us understand your academic potential. But when we're assessing your suitability for medicine, we're looking at a range of things, including your ethical awareness, your honesty and integrity, your communication skills, and your motivation for wanting to study medicine. So it's possible that amongst the questions you might get asked something about ethical issues. And these are the kinds of things that you might come up against, really, in the popular press. These might include issues relating to, it could be any number of controversial issues in medicine, but I suppose that examples might include to discuss the ethics of whether there's a place for euthanasia in medicine, or the ethics of abortion, or things that clinicians might encounter, like patients who might refuse treatment for life-threatening conditions. I mean, so these are issues that face clinicians on a daily level, and the answers are, of course, very complicated, and just require you to just sort of put yourself in the position of the patient and the doctor, and to think through perhaps using some of the the widely available sort of pillar of medical ethics. And so we might encourage you to just think about some of those topics. You should be thinking about those things if you're interested in a career in medicine, from both the perspectives of the doctors and the patients, and read a little bit into what these so-called 4 pillars of medical ethics are, that the technician might use to make a reasoned judgment about what the best thing to do is. So I hope that helps a little with that.
Thank you. And another question about engineering. What are engineering tutorials like?
So they usually are about going through a problem sheet. So for each set of usually 4 lectures that you have in the department, you will receive a problem sheet, which is like 12 to 12 questions, little maths problem or physics related problem, like a statics, dynamics, or electricity. And so you are supposed to prepare the problem sheet in advance. So we usually assume that you need to spend at least 10 hours of work on your problem sheet. And then you can come to the tutorial with your prepared sheet. And we meet like with 2 or 3 students at a time. And usually what we go is we go through the problem sheets, not necessarily all of the questions, maybe the one that were the trickiest, or there was a discussion, and we talk about the difficult points, the different assumptions, maybe going beyond the questions. And it's really a time for you to raise questions to your tutor, for the tutor to assess whether you are on top of your subject or if there are problems to address. And it's also a good time to share with other students how you approach the problem, hear about different solution techniques that maybe is different from the one you chose. And it's really a great time to discuss and to learn more about the subject.
Great, thank you. And there's a general question. I'm not sure which subject it applies to. Well, I think it applies to all of them potentially. And it is a question that a lot of potential applicants might ask themselves. So what do I do if I'm struggling with my workload? That's, I think, not a question about the workload in the run-up to admissions, but when they're on course, something people could worry about. Does anyone want to respond in relation to their subject or more generally?
I'm happy to take this. I think one of the beauties of the collegiate system is that we have tutors which communicate closely. So the first thing you would do is if we were concerned, we would raise it with you in private. If you were concerned, we make it very clear that you should do the same with us. The tutors would also talk about any concerns they had about you, just to see whether the issues are specific to a particular area, or whether there's a broader issue of workload or overcommitment, morale, health, diet, whatever it might be. So there is a great deal of pastoral support. If the issue is purely academic, we can focus down on that, whether there are issues with particular parts of the course, mathematics or organic or practicals. And this is something that the tutors will also discuss, so we can see whether we all agree, whether the issues are broad or whether they're very specific. And then it would typically be my job as the senior tutor to sit down with you and suggest a way forward. So you are monitored very closely all the way through 4 years. So any issues we are fully primed to deal with.
Kevin?
It might also be worth saying, especially in the first year, often people find the subject quite hard, but this is because it is hard. So one of the things about, it often happens people maybe didn't find A-levels too challenging, and then they get to university mathematics and it's a completely different ballpark. And I think that's not unique to mathematics. It's true, just of the level at which we're studying subjects. But so there can be a lack of confidence that we can help people get back, because it's simply addressing the fact that now you're doing things that really are very sophisticated and difficult. And the reason you're having difficulty with them is because they're just difficult concepts that took hundreds of years for people to get right. So that, on the flip side, then has the benefit that you really feel a sense of achievement when you have mastered those things.
I just want to add as well to what Jason's points about the collegiate system and the tutorial system picking up on problems and being a good way of communicating difficulties. In college, we have a lot of welfare support as well, particularly at Christ Church. So there's a whole sort of different levels of welfare provision, going from peer supporters who you can talk to quite easily, to professionals, including professional counsellor and a nurse who's on site, and a welfare supporter who's based in Christchurch all the time. So you can sort of talk about your problems at different levels, at whichever level you feel is most appropriate. Not to say that everyone does encounter problems, but it is normal to feel some difficulties in the transition into first year in particular, especially if your schooling is interrupted and we don't know whether next year's intake will have that problem. There was another, I don't know if anyone else wants to respond to that issue about workload, or yes, Jason?
I think I'd also add the fact that you have, we assign you a college mother or father, and so these are typically people in years above you in your subject. So these can be a very good base for a very good reference point for how difficult they found it, or particular parts of the course, as well as the people actually in your year. So you'll have a good reference for whether the issues are peculiar to you or whether they're broader issues. And that can be hugely helpful because it's very difficult it's very common in isolation for you to assume it's you. And very rarely is that true. So the support from other year groups within the college, as well as those in your year, is something that we really do encourage here.
Does anyone else want to add something to managing workload in the first year? I think a lot of those things apply across the subjects, in fact, don't they? So there's a question that has been put in two different ways in the questions we have from before, from earlier. One is in a sort of general blanket form, and one is specific to medicine. I think it might be slightly different in the case of medicine. So the question is, because of COVID, a lot of people have had their summer plans interrupted. People might have been doing, intending to do subject-related work placements, and they were probably wanting to put that on their UCAS forms and show that they've been doing things. And so how will we as admitting tutors take that into account? The fact that some of these things haven't been possible. And then sort of the same question for medicine, but in relation to, I think, hospital work and experience, which is much more specific. But I think in most other subjects, it's more sort of general experience. So I don't know if you want to start with that, Stephanie, and then perhaps we can see what other subjects have to say.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and of course, we completely understand the situation that everyone finds themselves in. And for medicine, yes, it's not just hospital settings, but all healthcare settings, all care home settings. And I think care home settings were often a more readily accessible venue for lots of applicants to find their experience, because they would be more local. It was easier to sort of turn up and offer to volunteer and do shopping and interact with people in care homes. And so yes, that problem extends beyond just hospital work experience to all sorts of volunteering and healthcare settings. So we completely understand that, and this will be something that's affected really everyone. And of course, when we assess your applications, we'll completely take this into account so that it doesn't impact negatively. And so we'll add specifically then again for medicine that remember that work experience is really very desirable, but it's not a fixed requirement. So it's not something you have to have. But the reasons why, there are lots of reasons why it's particularly useful, and there are some strategies that maybe you can adopt to sort of think about it a bit more further. Because of course work experience for medicine is really important for helping you to understand the profession a little bit more and inform your commitment for what's a really, it's a lifelong commitment. And so it's as important for you to do that for your own benefit than as it is to really be able to show that to us. I think it's really important that you have a strong sense of that commitment and the profession. And so you can explore those opportunities in a sort of a range of other ways. You can, certainly for medicine, you can read lots of popular books about experiences of junior doctors, memoirs of clinicians in a range of different fields. You can talk to healthcare workers that you know, or that are friends of the family or friends of friends. There's so much to read about perhaps specific diseases that interest you, or patient experiences of a disease or treatment, so that you can really get to grips with how modern medicine really works. there's always lots in the lay press about developments in medicine, technology in medicine. So you can just really begin to arm yourself with lots of just sort of practical experiences of the way medicine works. The Medical Schools Council also has a few nice pages and suggestions for other ways to get some relevant experience. And these can include all sorts of volunteering experiences for you to practice sort of working with others and committing to others and being generous with your time and helping others, so that you get to sort of have at least those sorts of experiences, which are so valuable for working well within a team and being able to understand the views of other people, and so how you might work as a medical professional. And then also, of course, an application deadline to study medicine doesn't mean that's also the deadline for you starting to gain relevant experience. I think that for a lifelong commitment, that you might find that there are more opportunities to start gaining more experience after you've applied, and that will still be really invaluable for informing your commitment, your understanding, your insights, your dedication. And so don't stop exploring those opportunities after the 15th of October deadline. Continue to look at those opportunities. Maybe even get your schools involved in, if you can't go to the healthcare setting, seeing if you can get healthcare professionals perhaps to come and talk to your school, or other schools might not be happy about risk assessments and inviting people into the schools at the moment. Perhaps you can organise little sort of video sessions where you get a local doctor to do Q&As with you, or tell you what their life is like. So I think we can all start to be a bit imaginative about the ways we might, you might learn more about the profession to just really inform your own understanding and commitment. So it's as much about you understanding that as it is about you demonstrating that to us.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on the issue of missing out on summer experience? I imagine in other disciplines it may be less crucial, but yes, Laurence?
Yeah, I just really want to say I fully agree with what Stéphane said about the fact that you should treat this work experience as something for you, not for us, and especially not for the sake of ticking boxes and filling your CV with tons of experience just to show off that you have done a lot of things. That's not what we are after. So it's much more interesting for us to learn about what did you do to reinforce your choice and your motivation, and what do you like about, in my case, engineering? Why? And there are many, many possible answers to that, because it's a very broad field. So there may be many reasons why you want to study engineering. And we're really curious about hearing why. And it can be work experience, can be other readings, other open courses you can find online, many things. There's not one single answer that we are after, but we really want to find a genuine answer and honesty, and not just showing off. That's my main point.
Anyone else have anything to add? Or I think we can all agree with that. Yeah. We've got a question that's just come in about computer science. So I've never studied computer science before. What are interview questions like? Owen, do you want to tackle that one?
Okay, so with CS interviews, what we're really assessing is your ability to think algorithmically. So we'll ask abstract problems, and we might ask you to write some pseudocode and assess that. One of the great things about computer science is that it's really a broad spectrum discipline. So you have on one end, things that are more sort of hardware related, and on the other hand, you have things that are more sort of mathematics. So we try and ask questions sort of relevant to all of those, but we never ask questions about specific programming languages that's irrelevant to this. So really, it's algorithmic thinking and also assessing math abilities. So that's generally what a CS interview would be like.
Great, thank you. And a question about biochemistry. What are biochemistry tutorials like, Tom?
Well, hopefully they're a bit of fun, but they tend to be essay-based, particularly in the second and third year. So you will have more than likely had lectures on a series on a topic, been given a reading list and an essay title, which you'll prepare in advance, and then from that you'll have a discussion on the topic. And some of it might give you some of the clarity that you may have missed from the lectures, but it usually goes on beyond the lectures into sort of different areas and look at some of the latest research and ideas and concepts that you discuss with your tutor and your tute partner, and hopefully it's a dynamic kind of discussion.
And we have a question that came in earlier about maths and statistics, but more specifically to do with course transfer. So is it possible to transfer after you've started between maths and stats and mathematics? And I don't know whether the issue of possible course transfer might apply to other subjects as well, but Kevin, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, so in the particular case of mathematics and statistics, that joint degree is identical to the mathematics degree in the first year. So it's actually very easy to move between maths and statistics and mathematics. The statistics department might like me too much if I said it doesn't really matter which one you apply to in your first year. In fact, we've discussed whether we should just get rid of it as a subject that you apply for in the first year and just let people decide at the end of the first year whether they wish to specialize more in statistics, which is really the distinction that you're drawing. So you're certainly at Christchurch, we're happy for people to apply for either. And like I said, really, I tend to take it as a provisional assessment and just let people come and spend a year learning mathematics and probability and some statistics. And then at the end of that year, if they tell me, no, statistics is definitely where it's at for me, then it's very easy to move into the maths and statistics stream. And in fact, it's even possible halfway through the second year, provided you took the probability option course in the first term of the second year, you're still lined up to do everything that a maths and statistics candidate needs to do. So between the joint schools of maths and statistics and mathematics, it's very easy to move between. With other joint schools, that there are different complications depending on the combination.
I don't know if anyone else has other course transfer issues that often come up that you think you can address. In most cases, it is more difficult. That one sounds like an unusual possibility.
Yes, that one is just that the background that you want students to have is so aligned in the first year that it made, in the end, no sense to differentiate between them at that point.
Good. There's a general question, will interviews be recorded? So as I'm sure you all know, interviews are going to be done entirely remotely this year. And so the question is, will they be recorded? And I think perhaps I can answer as the tutor for admissions that as far as we know, interviews will not be recorded. The university is obviously working on the format at the moment, and it is being decided at a university level, but there's no plan for the interviews to be recorded, and we would not record them without the consent of the individual in any case. So, I mean, if there was a particular reason for one to be recorded, which I'm struggling to think of, then it would have to be done with the permission of the interviewee. And then we have a question which sounds like it might get some of you in competition with each other. So I'm a year 12 student torn between biochemistry, chemistry, and biology. What are the key highlights of each subject compared to the other? So you've got this is your chance to go head to head, biochemistry, chemistry, and biology. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start. I think it's a very personal choice. I think it's and you have to follow your gut as well as anything else. The reality is you won't really know what the subjects are like to do here until you're doing them here, by which case it will be too late. I think open day information, contacting the admissions office, looking at the degree structure, thinking about what you want to do post your degree. In chemistry, I think the course here, so it's the biggest department of chemistry in the world, in the Western world. It is the best in the UK. And I think its unique feature is probably that it's the 4-year structure. So very intense learning years 1 to 3 with entire 4th year of world-class research. So it's a master's degree. And I can say, having examined elsewhere, that chemistry here is taught at a very, very high level. and at the end of those 4 years, you are sought after in a very broad range of jobs. But it's in the end, you have to do something that you enjoy. Otherwise, the work will feel a lot harder. So I will stop there and let the others have a word.
Tom or Tonya, who wants to go next?
Okay. Yeah, I think Jason's right. It's, you've got 4 years. It's the same in biochemistry, and the good thing is that the real highlight, I think, is that 4th year, the masters, where you go into a lab, and it's now virtually a whole long year project. It's the same as chemistry, and we have a lot of students that actually go into chemistry because there's a lot of groups that are based over the road that are at the interface between chemistry and biology, and so there's still options to work in that area if that's the sort of thing that you really feel passionate about and you learn through the course. This course here is a biochemistry course. Some other sort of courses in the other universities are slightly more genetics based, but we still do some really sort of not some really good chemistry in the course. There's still an organic sort of chemistry. It's called mechanistic chemistry now in the 1st year, but it's still got organic component, and the structural biology and is world leading here.
And Tonya?
I think what I would say about the biology course is that because it's very broad, it ranges from ecology, evolution, cellular and molecular biology, genetics, some biochemistry, that as a student trying to decide between the subjects, it would be worth making a bit of a kind of a Venn diagram, overlapping circles of what the subjects are covered in each of the 3 areas, and then try to find where your specific interests lie in terms of whether actually ecology and evolution is of no interest, and really you're mostly interested in the kind of biochemistry elements of biology, in which case the biochemistry subject might be more suitable. Whereas if you're interested in the ecology and evolution elements, then maybe the biology degree would be more suitable. Because in biology, we expect students to engage passionately, ideally with all across the range of the different subjects that we cover in the course. So students that really are very specifically interested in genetics, for example, sometimes find there's a lot of pressure to engage with other areas that are less of their specific interests, and it might have been more suitable to be on a different course. But of course, I think biology's great.
That was the 2-minute hard sell. Well, it was very diplomatically put, everyone. And there's another question about biochemistry, but in fact, it is also on a more general issue. So someone's thinking of applying for biochemistry post A-level. What is your view on gap years? So we'll start with biochemistry, and then if anyone else has a point about gap years, we can make that. Tom.
Yes, so biochemistry, there's no test or anything you need to do in advance. So your application will be received along with everybody else's in October, but you'll have the advantage of having the grades already sort of confirmed. So you're treated the same. And then in the gap year, I think people will be looking for you to show the passion for biochemistry or whatever course you're doing to spend some of that year doing something in that area.
Does anyone else want to add something on gap years? How you look at gap years in assessing an application post A-level? Kevin?
Yeah, maybe just to reinforce what Dom said, it's in a lot of technical subjects, if you just don't engage with them at all for a year, you get quite rusty and you forget things. So if you do take a gap year, it's a great idea to have some way of engaging with the subject in a real way in that year.
That sounds very sensible to me. Anything else? Tonya? Yes.
We find, so sometimes students say in the interview, for example, that they're keen to take a gap year, and it's best for us if the student also has a plan about what they're going to be doing in the gap year, not just that they're tired and they'd like some time off, but rather that there are some exciting things that they'd like to do and that they've engaged with perhaps a research facility or a fieldwork opportunity or something like that, where, as Kevin says, that they're getting some experience and engaging with the subject.
And Jason, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I think as has been alluded to, it depends a lot on what you do in that year and the the reason why you want a gap year. I think generally speaking, you're assessed on a broad range of things which are positive or negative. I think we would probably view a gap year as not a positive, generally speaking. I think because, as Kevin alluded to, a year away from chemistry would make you rusty, and you can't afford to be rusty when you start here. So it does depend critically on what you're doing in that gap year. If you're outside the sphere of scientific thought or chemistry specifically, then you would be slightly weaker potentially than you would be otherwise. So it's not a massive criterion for us at all, but I think we would view it as something that potentially could make your life harder.
Does anyone want to agree or disagree with that? I mean, I think Dom evoked an advantage, which is that the tutor knows you've already got the grades, but Jason's pointed out that the dangers of going rusty. So I guess it's a plus and a minus, and you can probably avoid going rusty if you really work out a solution. But that's quite hard at the moment because the opportunities for other activities are reduced. There's a question about medicine. So is medicine at Oxford more prestigious than medicine at another Russell Group university? And how's it different? Well, start with that one. There you go, Steph.
Is it more prestigious? What do we mean by that, really? I mean, I think that the most important thing to think about when you're trying to study medicine at a medical school or university is that you want to give yourself a great chance to have a fulfilling and successful career. I think that's really much more what medicine should be about than so much about prestige, is my view. But in terms of, I suppose, the real way in which we would, think about what prestige means for how that will impact on your ability to have a fulfilling and successful career, I suppose the useful ways that we can think about that are that Oxford is very, very highly ranked, and in fact, typically comes top internationally for medical schools. And so in that sense, it is prestigious, but it's top because of the teaching, the research, the success rate of future placements and careers. And so, it's an extremely great place in its teaching and its research and its clinical environment to do medicine, to give you the best chance to make a success of your career in your discipline within medicine.
I think in general on the issue of prestige, I mean, most people probably know Oxford has just been ranked first in the world in 2 different evaluations recently. There's no doubt that the prestige is there, but it's also true that there are a lot of other brilliant universities. And if you don't get your interview at Oxford and you go to another very good university, please don't break your hearts over it. There are other possibilities out there, and a lot of them can lead you to extremely successful careers doing wonderful work and potentially coming back to Oxford as a lecturer afterwards. So it's not the only solution by any means. It is a wonderful place to be, but it shouldn't be the goal of your life. There are other things to aim for. Does anyone want to add anything on this issue of sort of prestige in their own subject? Or we can, yeah, Tonya?
I don't think it's a massive giveaway to say that sometimes in interviews, we start off with a question, something like, why do you want to study biology? And when students, which occasionally happens, they say, I want to come to Oxford, then that isn't very helpful to us. It doesn't tell us about why you want to do biology or what your special interest is, and it doesn't inspire us with confidence that you're passionate about the subject. And so, although, as Jenny says, there are lots of special things about Oxford, and it is a great place to be. Actually, when it comes to choosing the course, it needs, I think, to be really about the course and not about the place. And so we need to be confident that that's really the reason you want to be here.
Kevin, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, the benefit of prestige if there is one, so to speak, in mathematics, where we're arguably the best department in the country, is that we represent a lot of very active mathematics research. So the degree that we can then offer, certainly by the time you get to the 3rd and 4th year, really gives you an opportunity to see the subject, a huge variety of aspects of the subject, and to pursue them at a very high level. So in that sense, the prestige has a benefit for you because you get this amazing exposure to the subject. But I would have thought, in terms of, do you want to come to Oxford, the other thing to really think about is that we teach in a really rather unique way in comparison to universities in the rest of the country, because of the college system and because of the tutorial system. So maybe it's at least as important to ask whether you think that's the environment that would most help you thrive intellectually. So, we have lots of prestigious departments, that's true, but that's not important. What's important is whether you think that will give you an advantage in your appreciation of the subject and and just an environment in which you will thrive.
Great. And we've got a general question about the relationship between studying and research, so undergraduate studies and research. Does each tutor's area of research have any impact on a student's studies? And can I get involved in their area of research at any point in my degree? So I don't know, does Jason wants to start with that one? Yeah.
Well, I guess there are 2 levels to this. I think the answer to the extent to which a tutor's research activities impact on their teaching is probably minimal in chemistry. I think all your tutors are research active, and they all tutor across the entire scope of the course. They may have areas which they prefer, or like everybody, but generally the impact on the teaching is limited. In terms of discussing research and opportunities for research, or joining the research team, that becomes most appropriate in the 4th year. So in the 4th year, you do an entire year of research, and all faculty members will offer projects, including your tutors. So absolutely, you can join your tutor's research team if that's what appeals to you. But that decision will be based really not on whether they're your tutor or not. It'd be based on whether the research area is one which appeals to you. Of course, if you get on particularly well with that tutor, then that's also a plus point. But those 2 things are a little separate. So the research activities and the teaching are a little bit separate. The only area where they overlap potentially is summer projects, which apart from this year, we often do run, where you can join a research group for 6 or 8 weeks just to get some experience in a laboratory.
Did anyone else want to add anything? That I don't know whether the relationship between research and undergraduate teaching is different in different areas. Are there any interactions in your subject? Kevin?
Yeah, I think Jason's of course right that it being research active maybe doesn't sort of directly impact how I'll teach a particular course. But I think there is a real advantage to be in being taught by people who are research active, that the sort of engagement with the subject and maybe the enthusiasm that they bring, or the ability to connect it to, connect maybe fairly basic things that you're learning in the first year to point out that they lead on in lots of interesting directions can really help you engage with the subject or get a better sort of overall picture of the subject. When it comes to whether or not you should join your tutor's research group, that I think I would kind of shy away from that, in the sense that different people have quite different interests, and I want to make sure my students get the best opportunities that we can find for them. So you generally find students have particular interests, and they may well not be in my research area. I mean, they're wrong, obviously, but they're people. But then I can easily go and find, because I'm in a huge department, some colleagues who are better aligned, and maybe try and arrange for them to have an opportunity to do a summer project with that person. So again, I think having research active tutors doesn't mean you should go into their research group, but they should be able to guide you and give you sort of pointers of how to start engaging with research.
Were you going to add something, Laurence? I think you had a hand up.
Yes, but just to confirm that also in engineering, you have the opportunity to do research in the 4th year. So there is a 4th year project and you can, well, choose your tutor for that. Well, there is some selection and process there, but you have a good chance to do research in a research group on a topic that you like, and it may or may not be the tutor from your college. It's completely independent. So don't be frustrated if you are assigned to a college where you feel like the tutors, their area of expertise is not what you want to do. You will have the opportunity to do research in your 4th year project with another tutor if you feel like this is more your area, and you may also find out new areas that you didn't think about, and you will discover new research domains as you go through your studies. So there's no issue there.
Great, thank you. And I might just add that Christchurch has some summer bursary allowances that students can apply for, and they cover students in lower to middle income backgrounds, so that they can help with the costs of, for example, summer work placements, often at the end of the final year, but that it can be earlier in a summer before the final year as well. And we've often given those to people doing lab placements in the sciences, so that can be really helpful. We've got a question about biology, but again, I think it does sort of apply across a wide range of subjects. So although the biology course requirements are 3 A-levels, is it worthwhile holding on to 4 to 5 A-levels? Is it common for some applicants to have 4 A-levels? So we'll start with biology, Tonya, and then others.
Yeah, so the requirements are A*, AA at biology A-level, at A-levels for biology, and the A* needs to be in a math or science. But apart from that, I would think that there would need to be a special reason to be holding on to additional A-levels. So if a student has a special area of interest that they're very keen to hold on to, and that applies either in a central or tangential way to their biology studies, then that's fine, and they can explain that to us in the interview. But I don't think it gives a student a special advantage to be taking 4 A-levels over somebody who's taking 3 A-levels.
And was it Jason you wanted to add something to that about 4 to 5 A-levels?
Sure, I think like a lot of these things, it's a balance. I think if you your offer in chemistry, it would be it'd be A*, A*, A. What you do on top of that is not particularly of interest to us. I think the bottom line is, if you can manage to take more and secure those grades, then absolutely do that. You want your life to be as broad as it can possibly be. If there's a risk that you'll be overloaded and the core parts of what we're looking for will suffer, then of course that's a bad idea. We do get a lot of people that apply and come here with 4 A-levels, that's true. Also 5 is relatively rare, but we do see it. I think my answer would be close to Tonya's, really, that you want to focus on what you have to achieve to get in here, and anything on top of that, if you can manage it, is great, but you have to be realistic about your ability to do that.
Does anyone want to add anything to that? Yes, Steph.
Yeah, just a tiny follow-up, that we don't formally make any admissions decisions in medicine based on more than 3 A-levels. So, you know, it's not any formal part of any assessment criteria, whether you have, you know, 3, 4, or 5 A-levels. We just assess on 3 A-levels.
So I think that's true across the board. If you do take a 4th A-level, it's not part of the requirements and it won't be added in mathematically. It might impress a tutor when they're looking at your UCAS form, and in some subjects they will give a grade to that. So it will be part of an overall picture, but it's not, that 4th A-level isn't going to be part of the basic evaluation, so to speak. And Jason's point about it being good to take on more things, you know, it's a choice between perhaps taking on that 4th A-level and doing some experience in your subject. You know, you've got to sort of weigh up what it is you're devoting your time to. So yeah, it's not necessarily the only option. There's a question about interviews for which I have a lot of sympathy. So what happens if I completely freeze in an interview and don't know what to say? This does happen occasionally, and of course it's a question that concerns all subjects. So I think Jason's offered to start. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I think we're all very sympathetic. I think a bad interviewer would be a person that sits back and looks sternly at you while there's 25 minutes of silence. So I think we see it all: language barriers, cultural barriers, different levels of nerves, different levels of teaching, and really our job in our time with you is to get as much out of you as possible. So if you look nervous, we'll go in to the point where you're less nervous, take you somewhere where you're familiar, and we'll lead you around on a piece of paper. That's typically what we do. We never, ever leave you to freeze. We would take you somewhere where you're comfortable and lead you to a problem through a different route. So that is part of what we do. So we see it a lot. I really wouldn't worry about it. It's really our job to bypass that as an issue.
Would anyone like to add something, Kevin?
Yeah, maybe it's also useful to say, because newspapers like to write horrible articles about Oxford and Cambridge interviews. The interview is never designed to trick you. The whole point is we're trying to learn what insights and understanding you have about the subject. So we really want it to be an opportunity for you to shine, for you to be able to demonstrate what you understand and what you see you can do with the subject. So I think we unfortunately get kind of negative press just because newspapers like writing that kind of article, saying that we like to come up with fiendishly nasty questions that will trip you up, and that's not the goal at all. We want to have an interesting conversation with you about the subject and try and get as much of an understanding of how you appreciate the subject as we can in the time that we've got.
Anyone else on what happens in an interview if you freeze over? Stephanie?
Well, to follow on from and to second those comments of Jason and Kevin, you know, that freezing is the last thing we would want. We have lots of strategies. We would change tack. We have different segments to the interviews, so you can kind of start afresh. If something goes to pot, you know, we move on and we just start a new topic. So there's all sorts of things we can do. But I think it's also worth pointing out that you know, what we're also trying to do is to get you in an interview beyond the limit of your current knowledge, because we don't just want to be testing that, but we want to get you to think. And so we're really trying to get you to a point where you really don't quite know what it is that we're talking about. And so expect to get to that point where you don't know the answer and you don't quite know, but we want to get you to explain what you think the answer might be and why. So expect to get to that point and don't think it's all going wrong if you're there thinking, I don't know what to say next, but rather explain what you're thinking and why, and explain your reasons. And that's what we would like you to expect, really, to be challenged and for it to be hard, so that you rise to it and tell us what you can think about.
Anyone else on that? We move on to what I think it has to be the last question. Do you have any final words of advice for someone applying this October? Anyone want to answer that last question? I mean, I think that the general thing to think about with applications is it is stressful. Having an interview in particular stressful. It's like a job interview, so it's always going to be a bit stressful. But it's great to get to that point, and it's normal to be stressed. So a couple of deep breaths, and we're not trying to make you more stressed. It's just inherent in the process of being evaluated. So that would be one word of advice. A lot of people are in the same boat. Don't listen to people who sound as though they're too confident, because they're probably just boasting. Any other words of advice for people applying this October? In that case, we might conclude there, just to say that the second hour of this process for the Sciences at Christchurch is a typed chat, which is also live, and it will allow us to answer any questions that haven't been answered yet, and also some subject specific ones. So you can, if you've got particular focused questions that you thought were too focused for this live stream, you can put them in the web chat, which will be live for an hour now. So do come and join us on the typed chat, and we will say goodbye here now, and I hope to see you over, well, not see you, but hope to see your questions over in the typed chat. You can also vote up questions that are already there from other people. So lovely to to hear people speak to you, and we hope you've enjoyed it, and will contribute to the type chat. So bye everyone. Bye.